what's the use of two strong legs if you only run away? And what use is the finest voice when you have nothing good to say? What good is strength and muscle if you only push and shove? And what's the use of two good ears when you can't hear those you love? It's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got. Yeah, it's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got.
Welcome back, friends, to Seeds of Revolution. And today we are welcoming back Frank López. Frank has spoken to us previously about a red road to the West Bank. Frank is a filmmaker, an anarchist, and a troublemaker, formerly of Submedia and now with Amplifier Films, which is the studio behind Red Road to the West Bank. Welcome back, Frank.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Joel.
My pleasure. My pleasure. That interview with you and Clifton on the film was fantastic, and there was so much about you and your background and Clifton's background and your lives of making trouble and making movies that we couldn't get to that I wanted to do a follow-up. I wanted to start by asking you about where you grew up, which was Puerto Rico. I'm an American. I know a little bit more about the history of Puerto Rico and the history of American colonialism. But for those of our listeners, maybe you could give us a little summary about what growing up in Puerto Rico was like and how you felt the presence of American colonialism on the island, specifically the island of Vieques.
Yeah, growing up in Puerto Rico is awesome. It's warm all year round. It's eternally summer. And I spent a lot of time on the beach, and playing outside. And people in Puerto Rico are very friendly and hospitable. So I really love it back there. It's home. But I
Sorry to
think
interrupt you, Frank, but and a lot of our Canadian listeners might not realize Puerto Rico is still sort of a territorial colonial possession of the United States. Puerto Ricans don't have the same rights as other Americans. Is that correct?
that is correct. But to answer your question directly, I became aware of this American presence when I would go to Vieques. It's an island municipality. Puerto Rico is actually an archipelago. It's a big island, but there's a few islands around it, and Vieques is one of the islands where people live as well. And it's a beautiful place with beautiful beaches, and we would go there as a family, as a sort of like local vacation, and we will befriend local fishermen, and we will go on boats with them and go fishing with them. And on one of those trips, I saw two Navy jets blasting pretty close to the water, making a lot of noise. And I saw one of the fishermen giving the middle finger to the jet. And of course, that prompted a conversation between me and my dad, asking him what that was all about. And the short of it, the U.S. Navy took 2/3 of the island to have a naval base, and another chunk of the island to use it as target practice for like warships to basically be out in the ocean and shoot at targets, dummy targets, at the beaches and then to do amphibian sort of exercises. And they will also rent these islands because it wasn't only on Vieques that they did this. They will rent the islands to NATO, to members of NATO and other nations as well. So this sort of prompted me to learn about the U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico in 1898, before Puerto Rico was part of Spain, was a colony of Spain, to be clear. And then we swapped masters in 1898. The United States essentially took Puerto Rico and for itself, and we've been a colony ever since. Some say Puerto Rico is the oldest colony in the world right now.
How do Puerto Ricans conceive of themselves? And, maybe I shouldn't ask you to speak for all Puerto Ricans, but at least you and your family, how do you conceive of yourselves in the context of the larger American polity? Like, do you and your family conceive of yourselves as American, as Puerto Rican American, as victims of American imperialism? All of the above, none of the above?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I speak for all Puerto Ricans, but Puerto Ricans at large are pretty clear about who we are. There is an intense pride of where we come from, and despite the American presence and the general acceptance by the population of the American empire, we are and we will always be Puerto Ricans, and even to a further extent, like Puerto Ricans call each other Boricua, which comes from Borique, which is the Taino name of the island. So if you wanna be down and you see a Puerto Rican, you say, "Hey, Boricua." And so there's this like really strong connection to our culture and into where we are. And just to sort of give you an example, like the issue of status, as we call in Puerto Rico, being like colonial status, is what drives local politics. And so there are three major political parties, well, were at one point divided as to what they would want the status to be it like the pro-independence, the pro-Commonwealth, which is really the pro-colony party, and then the pro-statehood, who just want Puerto Rico to be the 51st state of the United States. And I bring all that up because one of the reasons why Puerto Rico has not become a state is because national pride is so huge that one of the things that the pro Commonwealth Party tells people that if we become a state, we will use our Olympic team. Now, yeah, Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but we have our own Olympic team, and I mean that seems kind of reductionist. It's only part of it, but like um, despite over 100 years of U.S. occupation of the island, Puerto Rican culture is still pretty much alive and evolving, and people are extremely proud of it. I mean, I think that these days a lot of people know more about Puerto Rico because of the explosion of reggaeton, which is the genre of music that was you know pioneered in the Caribbean, but definitely like took hold in Puerto Rico, and like Bad Bunny being like the most streamed artist in the world right now is a Puerto Rican music artist, and who took his last record to really express everything that I just said. His last record is all about how much he loves the island and how sad he is about everything that's going on down there with the ongoing colonization of the island.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people also don't realize that in addition to music, the effect that Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican culture has had on America more generally, going back generations. I grew up with stories from my father, who was born and raised in New York, and he learned to speak perfect Spanish by taking the train into Spanish Harlem on the weekends. And all of his friends were, first, second generation. Well, they were Puerto Rican, first, second generation Puerto Rican Americans. And I'm not sure that people understand just how much impact Puerto Rican culture has on American culture, American existence, even.
Yeah, it's massive. My dad was born in the South Bronx, and many Puerto Ricans sort of like split their time or their lives, between the states and the island. And I mean, I think one of the lesser known contributions of Puerto Ricans to like modern popular culture is hip hop, which is like my favorite genre of music. And Puerto Ricans were there at the ground floor in the Bronx, where this music and culture started. Most notably with the breakdancing, but a lot of MCs and DJs were also of Puerto Rican descent. And back then, there seemed to be like a melding of identities, right? Like a lot of Puerto Ricans were either black or Puerto Rican, or they were both. And so it sort of shows how culture from a small island can actually make a huge impact in the larger cultural conversation.
I'd like to talk to you more about Vieques. You actually made a short documentary about Vieques, Vieques Resiste. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about the efforts of the people of Vieques to resist American colonialism and American militarism?
Yeah, I made the documentary on the 10th anniversary of the Navy being kicked out of Vieques, and I think that it's a long battle. The United States put the Navy in Vieques in 1941 during the middle of World War II, and then they never left, and they actually forced the population. Kind of looks the island has sort of the shape of a banana, if you can imagine it, and people used to live all over the island, and the Navy first they made a plan to move the entire population of Vieques to St. Croix, or St. Croix, as Americans know. It's a part of the American Virgin Islands, another U.S. colony in the Caribbean. But it's like taking a culture and putting it with a completely different culture. San Croix is Anglophone, and it's mostly a black culture, very different from the people of Vieques. Not to say that I mean there's a lot of black folks in Vieques as well, but it's just it's a completely different culture. And but then the Navy opted to just basically relocate the entire, or force relocate the entire population of Vieques to the middle of the island, and then they took the east and the west sides for their purposes. The people of Vieques have been trying to get the Navy out for many years, and they couldn't do it. And then in 1999, a missile from one of the exercises hit a little cabin that this security guard. He was a hired security guard for one of the bases, but a local man by the name of David Sanes got blown to bits with this missile. And I think that was the breaking point. People in Vieques just lost it. One of theirs had just been killed directly by one of these missiles, and so this started a campaign of occupying the target practice areas, and people in the mainland of Puerto Rico started getting involved, and it eventually became an international campaign, and it was massive. And then the Navy in 2000 finally accepted to leave. And it should be noted that they haven't fully left yet. But one of the biggest things that they've left behind is like this tremendous amount of unexploded ordnance all over the island, plus the massive contamination of heavy metals in the soil and in the water as well.
Yeah,
And
sorry to interrupt, Frank. I just wanted our listeners to hear this list. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the contaminants that the U.S. Navy has left on Vieques include mercury, lead, copper, magnesium, lithium, napalm, depleted uranium, I can't even pronounce this one, polychlorinated biphenyls, solvents, and pesticides. Those are some of the materials that the people of Vieques are still having to live with as a result of the U.S. Navy's actions on the island.
yeah, I mean, as a result, I mean, there's no quite study that links these two things together, but people in Vieques have a much higher rate of cancer than in the mainland. And a lot of people attribute this to all those contaminants that you mentioned. And one of the leading figures of the movement to kick out the Navy, Robert Rabin, he also died from cancer. And I met people from Vieques with different cancers as well when I went over there. So it's a tragedy, and I mean, I think that the world should see, like, just the images of Vieques. I mean, forget about everything else. Like, it's such an amazingly beautiful place. Like, why would you want to destroy it? Let alone like destroy the livelihood and the place where a lot of people call home. It's just the logic of empire really has no limits to what they will destroy without really any care for the people who are they're affecting.
What is the current, state of efforts to get the Navy to clean up its mess and to get the U.S. government to pay for restoration of Vieques to what it was before it was blown to shit by the U.S. war machine?
I can't really answer that question, so I'm not gonna dive into to what that is. But what I can tell you is that what Vieques is undergoing right now is a total colonization by Americans from the mainland, the United States, buying up all the best land and creating a total tourist paradise in the areas that are available to be used. And the last time I was there, making this documentary in 2010, um, this section of Vieques that I used to visit called Villa Esperanza, um, used to be like a mix of some American expats and a lot of local businesses, and there was really only one bar that was left, that was owned locally. Everything else was owned by Americans, and people there told me that it's much easier for Americans to do the paperwork and do all the bureaucracy and to start businesses than local Puerto Ricans. And this bar was actually a pretty a pretty interesting story, because the bar is really the only building that's actually right in front of the water. And there was this restaurant that has like a terrace that's blocked. The view of the ocean is blocked by the bar. This place is one of these few places where you can actually see the sun sort of dip into the water during the sunset. And of course, this restaurant would like its patrons to actually see that. So they made this exorbitant offer to the restaurant to see if they could buy it so they could level it. And the restaurant said no, but said like, we'll do you a favor. And they painted the sunset on
Huh.
on the wall of the bar. I'll try to dig up a photo to
That
send
would
to
be
you
great.
later.
I'd love to see that. That'd be wonderful. How, before we turn to imperialism and colonialism a little closer to home, how would you describe the state of the anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist struggle in Puerto Rico today, whether it's on Vieques or whether it's just the larger movement amongst Puerto Ricans? Is it sort of a resignation to being an American colony? Is there renewed efforts to demand independence?
Yeah, I think that we the pro-independence movement or the sovereigntist movement have a lot to thank to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Um, um, for people who might not remember, we had a massive hurricane, Category 5, but really it was probably a Category 6, because there's no category after 5. It was this gigantic, bomb we called Maria. And it devastated the island. It went right through the middle of the island, and just like, I mean, I went to the island right after the hurricane to help my parents out, and the hurricane had sucked all the leaves out of every single tree. I've never seen anything like it. Like, anyway, big freaking hurricane, to be sure. And as we seen in Katrina, and places where a lot of brown people live, the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, the United States is very slow to move to help those groups. As opposed to like when Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, like that city received aid very, very quickly. So Puerto Rico, a lot of people died during the hurricane. And Puerto Rico was without electricity for many, many months as well. And Trump went down there and threw paper towels at the crowd.
And for
Um,
those of you listening who haven't seen this, you should really pull it up on YouTube. It's a truly, truly horrifying sight.
yeah, it was disgusting, and not only that, like Trump was very insulting to Puerto Ricans in during many different periods of his first presidency, and to the point that at some point he offered Denmark to trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. Yeah, no, he was dead
I'm
serious.
laughing out of morbidness, not out of actual amusement.
No, but it's funny because it's true.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, yeah, life is extremely strange, and I mean, he still wants Greenland, for those of you who are wondering where that whole thing started. And so there's three major parties in Puerto Rico. As I said earlier, the pro-independence party, it's a bit of a joke. They don't even try. They get like less than 5% of the vote. It's basically like an assured gig for its leadership, who are all highly educated, like Harvard and Yale educated Marxists, who just know that every 4 years they had by law they have a gig there.
Hmm.
So this new political party, and I should say, as an anarchist, I don't believe in any of this, but it's definitely like a good barometer of where people are at. The Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana, or Citizens Victory Movement Party, had the possibility of winning the last election. This is like a brand new party.
Is it a
That
pro-independence party?
Well, it's a bit of a mix of a whole bunch of different tendencies. There was definitely like anti-colonial, but there was also groups who were more concerned with the environment. There were feminist activists,
Hmm.
and I think that, there's been a shift in the conversation in Puerto Rico for people who really care about the island, is that this whole idea of the status of Puerto Rico as basically our relationship with the United States has become a sort of like distraction from what really matters, which is
Hmm.
the poverty in the island, the healthcare system, which I should mention that Puerto Rico had like the best healthcare system of all the United States all the way up to the 1990s. We have socialized medicine, and it was actually a governor who was a doctor who completely destroyed that system. So now there's a healthcare crisis on the island. There's a total brain drain as well, as people leave the island as
They
well.
privatize the healthcare system. Is that the problem?
Yes, they privatized the hospitals particularly, and the healthcare system. I bring this up because Puerto Rico is a total disaster right now, but Puerto Rico had this incredible history of, like, the cooperative movement, for instance, was massive in Puerto Rico, not just for the banking, which is still a thing, but also for agriculture. Puerto Ricans had like great like subsistence agriculture that was destroyed by the industrialization of the sugarcane crops. And Puerto Rico had this great socialized healthcare since the 50s. Something that doesn't exist anywhere in the United States, and it was destroyed as well. And so, there was all these efforts by people to make life great under colonization, and they've been so slowly destroyed, not just by the U.S. but also by the ruling class of Puerto Rico. And so, all that to say that a lot of people are sort of coming to the realization that, fighting over whether or not we're going to be a state or independent every 4 years when we have elections, it's bullshit, and that people should actually start working towards fixing the things on the island. Because in the end, like, the U.S., we can vote all we want for during a referendum, but it's really up to the U.S. Congress to grant us this. And as long as the Republican Party is strong, we will never get this, because Puerto Ricans vote. The voter turnout in Puerto Rico is sometimes over 70%.
Wow.
Republicans know that if Puerto Rico becomes a state, it's their death nail. Puerto Ricans will vote Democrat almost certainly, and sadly, because that's Democratic Party doesn't really do anything for anybody. But I digress. I don't think the independence movement of Puerto Rico had what it will never be what it was before the United States government and the FBI destroyed it. And so I think that there's been a shift in prioritizing the well-being of the island, and really focusing on mutual aid, and more sort of community-based initiatives that actually meet people's needs.
I'd like to turn, because I know you're limited in time, but I'd like to turn to another anti-colonial project of yours, which was a film you made called Sacred Fire, Shani Piop's Stand to Protect Innu Territory. And that's about anti-colonial resistance a little bit closer to home for most of us. Could you tell us a little bit about that film and that story that you told?
Yeah. So Shani Piep is somebody who I've known for many years. She is she's Innu. She's also a musician, so she's pretty well known within the indigenous francophone world over here. And she invited us to a blockade that she had started the year before. So I made the film in October, I think, of last year. So she started a blockade in the summer of 2023.
Can you tell
And
us where this was, just for those of our listeners who aren't from Canada?
yeah, this is close to a very large lake called Lac Saint Jean, and I guess it will be like central Quebec, and so it's nowhere near the coast. But if people look at a map of Quebec, they could pretty easily find Lac Saint Jean, and it's just north of there. This is all Innu territory. Innu territory is quite large. It takes a big chunk of Quebec, mostly on the coast, on the eastern coast, or what people call the North Coast here. Beautiful part of the world, by the way. And so, like most of Quebec and really like most of Canada, like the logging industry here just basically takes and takes and takes, and this has been a crisis of overlogging um, since since I would say since the 70s. There's a famous singer here, Richard Desjardins, who's also a filmmaker, and he's been sounding the alarm about this for a long time. And Shani Piap and her people basically blocked the road, and then she did something that's called a sacred fire. And so this is a fire that's constantly lit. And so there's a caretaker who stays there with the fire 24/7. And he has to basically, even when he goes to sleep in the evening, he has to wake up, put an alarm like every 6 hours so that he can continuously like feed the fire. And this is a fire that's been burning for a long time, and that gets passed from community to community. But the main thing is to have a continual presence in this particular part, so that they can monitor the territory and see if they can prevent the logging companies from completely decimating it. Now, this is part of like a larger fight and throughout the province of Quebec, where indigenous people again have been screaming loudly that the moose populations and the caribou populations and a lot of species of animals are losing the land that they need to exist, the ecosystems that make their life possible. And about 5 years ago, a community close to where I live, they're Nerizu, or as more popularly known as Atikamekw, started doing blockades. And so this year, the Quebec government tried to pass, or is trying to pass, a new law called Bill 97, that would essentially grant the logging industry access to a lot of protected areas to log. And so a bunch of different nations got together, including Innu and Nerisu and Wendat as well, um, formed this coalition called MAMO, which means together, both in Atikamekw and Innu, to protect your territory. And then last week, different groups of people started blocking roads to sabotage the beginning of the logging season, and to send a message to the Quebec government that they're not going to stand by while they legislate their forests away.
In Sacred Fire, I forget if it is Shani Piap or somebody else, but they made a statement that I just thought was really interesting. They're talking about what they want from the Canadian government when it comes to logging. And they said, quote, "Ask for our consent, talk to us. Just explain to us properly what your work plan is, your vision for this year, and how you're going to implement all this," end quote. I thought that was really interesting because it is such a simple request. Tell us what you're doing, tell us why, tell us how you're going to do it in a way that is environmentally sound and respects our ancient and sacred connection to the land. And yet the logging companies and the Canadian government and Quebec don't. Why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose even such a simple request as talk to us, explain to us what you're doing and how you're going to do it, why that goes completely ignored? The Canadian government can't even give First Nations that of the most minimal sort of request.
Because it would be admitting that colonialism is real. It would be admitting that this is not our land to do what we want with it. I mean, this is my opinion. I don't think they've ever answered that question because to them, this territory is Quebec, which is a rather complicated issue as well, just because there's a lot of nationalism here as well for Quebec, not just as Canada, but as Quebec as a sovereign territory as well. And so I don't think the Quebec government wants any sort of competition about who the real owners of these territories are. And but that concept, free, prior, and informed consent. I mean, that is what a lot of Indigenous people are asking for. And I don't think anybody in Canada, I don't think any Indigenous group in Canada is 100% against the harvesting of forests. I think that this is something that it's always going to be a thing. I burn wood in my wood stove. Indigenous folks also burn wood in their wood stoves. They use the wood to build, I think that there are ways to harvest the forest without making it look like a bomb went off. I don't know if anybody of your listeners has ever seen a clear cut, but when I first came to Canada over 20 years ago, and I was in Vancouver Island, I saw beautiful large cedars and Douglas firs, and then all of a sudden there's nothing on the land. It's absolutely shocking. And I think that the demands for Indigenous people are very reasonable, as you stated. It's about communication and it's about partnership as well.
At one point in Sacred Fire, you show Shani Piop, she stops a massive logging truck by holding up her hand, and the truck comes to a halt instead of running her over, thankfully. When I watched that scene, in addition to being amazed by her bravery and her commitment, one thing I couldn't help thinking about was the truck driver. And it wasn't that I was thinking about who the truck driver was. I was thinking about who they weren't and who they never are. And they're never the people in charge. They're never capital. They are never investors. They are never decision makers. What is the significance of Shani Piop stopping that massive truck with her hand when the forces driving that truck, it's difficult to imagine them being stopped by anything, let alone community mobilization?
Yeah, as she told me, like she stopped that truck knowing full well that she cannot stop it forever.
Mhm.
Her main argument for doing it was to remind folks that the Innu are still there.
Mhm.
I think that for a lot of environmental people who care about the environment, I think that the work of Judy Barry should be required reading, or at least like look at her labor, because she was a great defender of the forest, but she also understood the sort of not contradiction, but the fact that people need jobs and that the workers are not the enemy. And as you say it, like that person driving the truck, he's not the one calling the shots. And I think a lot of the times, I think Indigenous people recognize this more than activists, right? Like we have to be, I mean, as long as the workers are nice with us, we got to be nice to them, because we're all trying to make a living here. And the
Class
fire
solidarity.
Yeah, the firekeeper, I'm kicking myself because I forgot his name. Was such a nice guy. He's the one who said, that the government should just consult with us. He also said that his dad was a logger, and he said, like, this is a good job, and And there is the possibility for people to make a living out of harvesting nature without destroying it. And I think that to a certain degree, if we can communicate something to the loggers, is that you want to keep having a job, and there's got to be forest for you to have a job. And so if you destroy all the forest, then you're not going to have a job. And so there has to be a lot of nuance in how we sort of approach this, and really like direct our rage at the owners. I have another video that I took earlier last year of Narisu blockade in near a community called Wemontashi, and the owner or the boss of the logging company was actually at the blockade, and I've never seen that before. And
Wow.
he was so angry because the cops were not doing anything, and he's yelling at the cops. He's like, these folks are blocking the road, and you're not arresting them. And you could see that air of superiority and hubris and this man, that I was very happy that I captured that, because it's one of those moments where you see why this is the way this is, and just being so racist, so openly racist to the Nerisu, that I think it's called like a Monday of resistance at kilometer 33. People should look it up on our website.
I know we're running short on time. How can we tie together Vieques, Bill 97, Sacred Fire? Obviously, there's overarching themes of anti-colonialism and resistance. But as somebody who lived in Puerto Rico, has experienced firsthand American colonialism, and has made films about both American and Canadian colonialism, are there any strands we can tie together to see this as part of a larger picture, part of a larger process?
Yeah, I think you named it. That's the word. It's a process. Colonization might seem like something out of the history books to some people, but it's just something it's like capitalism. It's still with us, and it continues. It's not something out of the history books. Colonization is like capitalism, and it's in different places, and it's in different parts of that process. In Puerto Rico, it's 500 and over 530 years now that we've been under colonialism, and you can see the effects. Um, in here in Quebec and in the eastern part of Canada, it's a little bit younger, but not that much younger. And so as a result, you don't see indigenous people everywhere like as you would in the west coast of Canada, for instance, and where you see more parts of the forest completely decimated. Capitalism and colonialism are brothers from the same mother. They rely on constant extraction as if the world had unlimited resources for it to continue to exist. And I think in our lifetime we're seeing, like, again, one of the most brutal colonial examples in fast forward, which is the colonization of Palestine and all the occupied territories.
On that note, if you'd like to see the film that Frank is working on, which is about Palestine, as well as his other incredible films, including Sacred Fire, they're all available on amplifierfilms.ca, which we will link to in the show notes. Frank, thank you so much for coming back to Seeds of Revolution. As always, it was interesting, illuminating, and a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much, Joel, and I hope that you guys keep going with this podcast, because it's truly a great gift. So thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
If Jesus Christ came back today like you threatened he will, which poor group of people do you think that he would kill? And who would Jesus choose to starve if you gave him the chance? And if there was a genocide, would he take a neutral stance? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want complicated and there's sinners on both sides? Or would he say that some people, they just deserve to die? If Jesus Christ rose from the dead and on a sidewalk slept, would you extend your hand to him or just watch where you stepped? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus hate the gay folk, the queer folk, or the trans? Would he suggest they end their lives according to God's plans? Would Jesus tell a homeless man to get a fucking job, or turn his back on the poor? Would Jesus be a snob? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus build a border wall? Would Jesus drive a tank? Would Jesus be a landlord? Would Jesus run a bank? Would Jesus Christ feel safe in his skin if he came to your town? And would you still believe in him if you found out he was brown? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Yeah, who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would